In the gospel this week, we have the age-old story of the prodigal son. Now, the story of the prodigal son is that this man has two sons, and they both are promised this great inheritance. And one demands his inheritance early before his father dies. And he goes off and he leaves home, and he squanders all of his inheritance on things of the world, on gambling and on food and on prostitutes and on all this stuff that's not only not really good for you or even a good investment of your money, but is actually sinful. And he does all of this, and he finds himself in the middle of the famine that strikes the country. In the middle of the famine, he realizes that he's just eating the slop that the pigs eat. And to hear that with Jewish ears, that's lower than low. I mean, pigs are unclean animals. The Jews would not only avoid eating pork, they would avoid going anywhere near where swine were. And this guy is so destitute that he's eating shoulder to shoulder with pigs the slop that the swine herders are giving them. And as he's at this lowest point of his life, he has this realization that the hired workers of his dad's household are taking better care than these pigs are. And so he goes home and he bursts into his father's house, and he's ready to greet his father by admitting his guilt, by admitting how terrible of a person he is. And the father's response is that he doesn't even let the son speak. The father runs out of the front door of the house, and he hugs his son, and he throws a cloak around his son's shoulders, and he has his attendants put a ring on his son's finger. And he has his servants go and slaughter the fattened calf, and they kill the calf, and they throw this giant feast for this long-lost son. Now, if I was the father in this story, I hate to admit it, but it would look different. If my son had been away, gambling, getting into all kinds of drugs, alcohol, hiring prostitutes, and squandering all of his money, living on the streets and eating with pigs and rolling around in pig slop, yes, I would be overjoyed if he came home. I'd make him shower, though. Right? I'd expect him to present himself clean before I put my finest robe on him, before I tainted my golden ring on his finger, before I had him sit at my table with the fattened calf and all my guests. I'd make him at least act like he was presentable. Go fake it. Go put a little bit of cologne on, change your clothes, brush your hair, clean your mouth. But this father grabs him where he is and puts him at the table, dresses him in all the finery, but still with all the stain, and puts him at the feast. There's a temptation in the church to sterilize the faith. And maybe there is good precedent. Maybe it is good, and in fact it is. It's a praiseworthy action to try to rid all stain of sin from my life, all temptation, all even the ode of sin, to get it rooted up and cast out of my life. But not to the exclusion of calling someone else. We try to sanitize the world, and the Pharisees were the ones who did it first. The Pharisees criticized Jesus for eating with tax collectors and prostitutes and sinners. They criticized him and ridiculed him for offering salvation to sinners. We cannot be a church that does that. We have to be a church that's willing to go out into the world and grab the smelly person who's been rolling around in the putrid reality that is sin and bring them here to this banquet, to clothe them with the blood of the Lamb, yes, through sacramental confession. Is that not what confession is? It's the Father's embrace of us. In all of our stink and sinful funk, that when we come home, the Father comes out to meet us in that confessional, and he embraces us. He brings us in and puts the finest robes of our baptism back around our shoulders. He sits us down in these pews, and he allows us to participate in this banquet. Clothed with the graces of the sacraments, he brings us to himself. If I had to be sterilized before I got here, I would have never been here. Jesus calls me. He calls you. He calls the person who thinks they're the most unworthy person to come be here. He calls each one of us, no matter the sin and mire that we're covered in, to come to him.